The NBA season is officially over for the Boston Celtics, and while there's a lot of questions that they have going into the offseason, the biggest one that we are going to be investigating today is, does Jaylen Brown deserve the Supermax contract? Is it worth going into the cap hell under the new rules of the CBA to pay Jaylen Brown almost $300 million over the next 5 seasons? Now, I just want to start out by saying that I'm a huge fan of Jaylen Brown. I think he has elite shot creation and shot making ability. I think any team in the NBA would love to have him on their team. And his defense is also really good, although you wouldn't think that because of this past playoff series against the Miami Heat. And it's because of not just the Heat series, but the entire playoffs as to why we're bringing up this question in the first place. The playoffs are a time when star players elevate their game. They're great during the regular season, but they're even better during the postseason. So we're going to do a little bit of an investigation today. We are going to dive into the numbers and some film and look and see if Jaylen Brown does deserve that contract. We're going into this completely unbiased. If anything, like I said, I'm a Jaylen Brown fan, so you would think I would be trying to prove that he does deserve the contract, but we're going to dig deep into the numbers and we're going to try and see if we can come to a conclusion on what Boston should do with Jaylen Brown. We'll provide some alternatives as well. I have a couple of ideas where if I was in Brad Stevens' shoes of what I might do if they decided not to hang on to Jaylen Brown, or if I would hang on to Jaylen Brown at all, but we'll get all to that. If you guys have any strong opinions either way, put them down in the comment section below and we can discuss. So the first thing that I wanted to know is I wanted to look at Brown's stats from the regular season compared to the postseason. Now, we're only using this one season, so I understand how flawed that might be right off the bat. But we have all of the All-NBA players, first, second, and third team members that made the playoffs, which, you know, I felt like it used to be that making the playoffs was part of getting on an All-NBA team. Maybe I was wrong outside of a couple outliers. But it is what it is. So we've got 13 names, starting with first team, then down to second team, then down to third team. On the left-hand side, we have just kind of the raw stats and shooting numbers from the All-NBA team members from the postseason. And then on the right side is the regular season. And then highlighted right here in the middle is Jaylen Brown. Now, what I'm comparing it to, I'm really comparing Brown to some of the other All-NBA players that we would consider as Supermax players. So that would be players like Giannis, Embiid. I'd even say Tatum is a Supermax player, yes. I love Jimmy Butler. He's kind of borderline, but I'm super biased about Jimmy Butler. Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, yes, absolutely. LeBron's down here even too. And so I just wanted to compare what type of increases or drop-offs that we were looking at from these other All-NBA players who we would generally accept, yes, they're deserving of a $300 million contract, as well as $60 million a year towards the tail end of the contract. Giannis is kind of an outlier here. He only played in a few games in the postseason. He was injured, missed some time. So, I mean, take with it as you will, but it is a significant drop-off. We also have a significant drop-off with Joel Embiid. Points per game down over 10. Rebounds are essentially the same. Assists are down. Steals are down. Blocks go up. Turnovers go slightly up. Field goal percentage goes down. And three-point percentage goes down as well. I realized Embiid's three-point making was a little off in the playoffs, so had to change that up real quick. But this is Joel Embiid. This is the MVP. Decent playoff run, made it to the Eastern Conference semifinals, and he just did not perform well. Lost to this same Boston Celtics team. Tatum's numbers are down a little bit too. Shooting splits are fairly even across the board. Assists are down just a little bit for Tatum. And I understand with the playoffs, they're playing more minutes, so the shooting numbers, the raw numbers might look a little different. But at the same time, we see players like Oh, let's see, Nikola Jokic. His points per game, rebounds, and assists all jump up. He's averaging a triple-double. And his shooting splits are down. Yes, so like the raw numbers, his three-point percentage goes up. Despite the elevated minutes and what you might say some weaker shooting numbers, they improve. They elevate to the occasion. Nikola Jokic has elevated to the occasion. Curry's numbers are about the same, just worse three-point shooting, which is understandable. Now, specifically looking at Brown, he has a decent size drop-off. It's not the biggest drop-off, obviously. You know, if we want to count Giannis, then sure, yeah, I guess. Embiid, the biggest drop-off. I would definitely say that Brown probably had the biggest drop-off. Butler is like the opposite of everyone else. Like Jokic had a nice size, little jump here from 24 to 29 points per game. Similarly here with Butler going from 22 to 28 points a game, 28.5 points a game, and shooting splits are down again, and he's getting more shots, so it kind of balances out there, but also his team is winning, so he's showing up when his team needs it the most. And again, this was not to prove nor disprove. This is just, I wanted to see how Brown stacked up with the other All-NBA players. If anything, it shows me that the Nuggets and the Heat were the deserving teams to be in the playoffs because their two leaders, their two stars, superstars and MVP in Jokic's case, elevated their play to meet the occasion. So that's really the most I'm getting from here. Again, I just wanted to look at the raw numbers and compare it to the others. I would love to see it over the years, how other All-NBA players play. Would love to see when they went to the finals what his numbers were compared to other All-NBA players. I simply just don't have the time to do that, unfortunately. This also is interesting. His free throw attempts were down. So this tells me that initially he was settling for jump shots rather than driving towards the basket. Maybe that was part of his problem. And it kind of looked like that. I'm going to be honest, the eye test, which is kind of what I wanted to get into next here, just kind of looking at the raw stats here. He just did not perform that great throughout these playoffs. This only goes back to the May 9th game against the 76ers here. Here we can look at his individual game logs. Averaged a lot of shot attempts against Atlanta. Played great in the Atlanta series. Okay, we'll give him that. He played great in the Atlanta series. Played decently good in the Philadelphia series. And then it was the Heat series where he played fairly poorly, which is when, honestly, you need him the most, quite frankly. Now, I'm not saying that Brown has to average 30 a game throughout the entirety of the playoffs. But what you need from a player that is going to have the max contract is consistency when it matters most. Yes, every single one of these games mattered. It's the playoffs. They all matter. But no one thought that Atlanta was going to win the series. Atlanta put up a much better fight than what I think most people thought, and honestly, it was this Atlanta series where I started to have questions and doubts about a title run for the Celtics, if we're being completely honest. And consistently, again, was playing fairly good in the 76ers series. But it's right here, when you're in the Eastern Conference Finals, you are on the precipice of moving on to try to win an NBA championship. And it's just, it's not there. It's not there. And what's crazy is he played fairly well in the finals too. I mean, the stats prove it. The eye test proves it also. It's just, he put up some decent numbers, but the shooting splits, like 47%, this is a very bad game right here. Okay, a lot of free throw numbers there. Not so much his best game in the Heat series. He drove to the basket. He got 10 free throws. And I think that's the root of it. I think he settled too much in this series. Maybe throughout these playoffs. He didn't shoot too many free throws in these playoffs. And in some of the games that he did, 7, 8, 10, these are some of the more efficient games. They're coming in wins as well. So that would definitely be something that Coach Mazzulla should have been looking into. So when we ask the question, does Jaylen Brown deserve the max contract? The numbers, I say, lean towards yes. Just the raw numbers, the advanced statistics, I would say yes. But there is a caveat here, and it's the eye test. And the eye test, I think, is just as important as the raw stats. And again, we're going to look at something where it is Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to look at some of the ball handling, which I think is the greatest drawback of Jaylen Brown. All right, so here we are. This is Game 7, Eastern Conference Finals. As of recording this happened a little less than 24 hours ago. This is the biggest problem I see with Jaylen Brown's game, and it's his ball handling. He's fantastic at finishing at the rim. Like I said, he's great at creating his own shot. Sometimes it falls, sometimes it don't. It is what it is. That's just the way basketball works sometimes. He's an okay three-point shooter. He's not what we would consider elite in today's game, but it's respectable. The problem that we're going to see, especially here, is his ability to drive left and just handling the ball in general. So we have this first play right here, 10:40 left in the first quarter. I mean, literally the game just started, driving left, and boom, Caleb Martin picks his pocket. He loses the ball, and then offensive foul going the other way. Again, we'll watch it again. See, he tries to cross over. It's a basic crossover. It is a generic crossover. If this is 2K, the man's handling is like at a 60. He has the most basic crossover ever, and any NBA player, anyone at like a pickup game, is going to be able to strip that if they have any type of wingspan. So we'll get to play number 2 here. He's got the ball top of the key. Gabe Vincent is the one this time, poking the ball away again. Watching it, it's just basic. It's just he loses that one. I don't even think, get it back a little bit more. That one I don't even think. Yeah, he just loses the ball going left. He just loses the ball, and then Butler picks it up. I remember that because, like, how is that not a take foul? Nothing was called there. Okay, so we've got 7:59 left in the third. Here he is going left again, gets the ball poked out from behind by Jimmy Butler. This is a great play by Jimmy, but just no awareness from Brown. And again, going left gets his cookies taken. And here we go again, guarded by Jimmy again, going left, and boom. There's no protection of the basketball. Look where this basketball is. It's way out here outside from his body, and it's like almost backwards behind him, like even with his body, where Butler can easily just give it that little love tap, and boom, there it is. Fast break going the other way. He's got to learn how to take care of the ball better. Now, Brown doesn't average too many turnovers a game, but again, this is Game 7, and this is a weakness of his game that is getting exposed by the Miami Heat. So here we are. He's guarded by Bam, and that time, it wasn't even like great defense by Bam or anything. If I can go back far enough. There's my co-host in the background. He just straight up loses the ball. Straight up just stumbles, tries to go for a crossover, and he just loses the ball. Critical possession down the stretch. I mean, obviously, you know, it's not like, you know, the game is like super close at this point in time, but still just a terrible possession nonetheless. It honestly amazes me that Jaylen Brown is as good of a scorer as he is without any sort of bag whatsoever. I mean, if the guy were to just spend this entire off season on improving his handles to a point that is beyond what feels like basic, he could be one of the most dangerous players in the league, and it would be a no-brainer to re-sign him. And we can talk till the cows come home about whether or not the duo of Tatum and Brown is a winning duo. Because the Celtics are going to have to remember this. They're going to be putting in $500 million into two players that aren't playmakers. There's no true point guard that's coming in to save them right now. They have Malcolm Brogdon, but he's been kind of injured and been used more as a sixth man, which honestly has kind of worked. How this duo has worked has been the staggering of minutes of Brown and Tatum during the regular season, and letting each one be the primary option in their own time with a point guard like Brogdon or White out there, or even Smart, and letting the offense kind of run through them and let them dictate how things go. So now we're going to kind of detour down towards what could happen if there is any hesitation from the front office to give Brown this huge contract. And if there is any hesitation whatsoever, then there definitely should be some sort of trade talks. In fact, Brown's name was thrown out into a potential KD trade earlier this year, and Brown got really upset about it, but it means that the Celtics, if it means improving, are open to it. And I have a couple ideas. Now, if the Celtics do not the unthinkable, but the unlikely at this point, and decide to move on from Brown, then I think the Portland Trail Blazers, and by extension, the Houston Rockets, are going to be their top two trade partners. Now, I really haven't worked out how the picks would work, but I really just kind of have the structure of what the players would be. And the first trade would be almost a straight up swap for Jaylen Brown and Damian Lillard. If the Blazers decided to that they had had enough, that it's time for them to go into full rebuild mode, I'm sure Boston would have to give up maybe 1 or 2 first-round picks. And then also, I decided to throw in Malcolm Brogdon in there because they need to make the Celtics, meaning, need to shed some more cap off to absorb Damian Lillard's contract, and also because now that they have a point guard coming in, it's kind of going to fall in between Brogdon or White. And as great as I thought Brogdon was this year, White is on a cheaper contract. So, and it could be incentive also to not trade as many picks to the Blazers, because they now have a point guard that can, in either scenario 1, scenario 2 here, in just this trade, and kind of sub scenarios where, let's say, you know, they keep the number 3 pick, they decide to move forward with a kind of a small retool rebuild centered around Jaylen Brown and then whoever's available at number 3. If it's Scoot Henderson, like it looks like it could be, then there's your point guard of the future, and Malcolm Brogdon continues his role as the 6th man and can teach Henderson how to be an NBA point guard. The other side of that is that it's all smoke and mirrors, that Scoot is going to fall to 3. He goes to the Hornets with number 2, and the Blazers just kind of pick whoever's the best fit with their team at 3, and Brogdon is your starting point guard, or maybe even your temporary starting point guard. Now, the second trade scenario sees the Blazers go into full rebuild mode with the Celtics getting Damian Lillard, but the Rockets enter as a third team, and they're the ones that get Jaylen Brown. And in return, primarily speaking, we still have Malcolm Brogdon going to the Trailblazers. That's kind of like the main swap for Damian Lillard. And then, of course, the number 4 overall pick going to the Blazers. So the Blazers are essentially giving up Damian Lillard for Brogdon and the 4th overall pick. And again, I don't know the specifics of the picks. I would really need to determine exactly what needs to happen. The Celtics need to be careful either way, because under the new CBA, it's going to be difficult for teams that are competitive, that have a lot of good players, that tip over the cap. It limits the amount of first-round picks that they can use in trades. So it's going to be really difficult to acquire more talent in the future. Again, I don't think Jaylen Brown is getting traded. I think more than likely what happens this offseason is that Brown is re-signed, he's given the Supermax, and Mazzulla is the one that gets the boot out, and they bring in another head coach, and they try to run it back for another year or 2 to see if they can remain competitive. But going after Lillard is a win now move. Lillard is actually going to be cheaper than Jaylen Brown over the next 5 years. And he brings that true point guard, but also has the shot creation that Jaylen Brown has. Now, is he a defensive liability? Yeah, but how many true point guards in the NBA that do what Dame does aren't defensive liabilities? And Lillard has never made it to the finals, but he's a proven product in the playoffs. He's one of the most clutch players in the NBA. Now, this potential trade with the Rockets also really depends on what the Rockets do this offseason with another potential acquisition of James Harden returning to Houston. If that's the case, I could see Houston being pretty aggressive and trying to work out a 3-team deal. It would be a crazy 3-team deal, but it's one that the Celtics definitely should listen to, even if their intention is to re-sign Jaylen Brown. You should always accept calls to look to improve, unless you have just like a super young roster and you're just, you're trying to rebuild, or you have a young roster and you're outpacing the rebuild and you're heading an amazing trajectory and your players are nowhere near what their peak or their potential could be. So back to our original question. Does Jaylen Brown deserve the Supermax contract? I'm going to say yes, because he's still young and has the potential to continue to work on his game, specifically his ball handling. If he does not increase his ball handling skills, if he doesn't work on that, then as this contract goes on, this could turn into a bad contract. But that's just kind of the give and take that you have to have. And Boston needs to make sure that this is where they want to go, because if Brown doesn't improve, if this is his peak, I don't think it's his peak, but if it is, we have to raise the question. If it is his peak, and this is, I wouldn't say this is Tatum's peak. I think Tatum is going to get a lot more efficient and get better. But if it is, that's bad news for the Celtics. It's kind of game over. There's no wiggle room under the new CBA, which is something that definitely deserves to be talked about. The CBA is wild. That's up and coming. Anyway, guys, what do you think? Does Jaylen Brown deserve the max contract or not? What should the Celtics do? Should they re-sign him, fire Mazzulla, run it all back? No firings, no trades, no nothing. Do they try to make some smaller trades and get some role players in here to try to improve their roster? Or do they try to convince the Trailblazers to semi-blow it up and give them Damian Lillard? And maybe they do get a new coach and maybe they go get Damian Lillard. Who knows? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can be notified whenever a new video drops. This is Jackson Law from Vendetta Sports Media, signing off, and I will see you guys next time.